Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. Prime Minister, prior to the last election, Labor promised a $275 cut to power bills on nearly 100 occasions. Since the election, you've never mentioned it. Last week, the government promised a return to industry-wide bargaining, which will mean more strikes and it will drive up the costs of living for families in our country. Why are Australian families paying the price for the Prime Minister's new priorities?
I call the Prime Minister.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I thank the Leader of the Opposition for his questions, spraying across the range of issues because they can't decide which tactic to land on. So perhaps one of those was from the Liberal Party and one from the National Party, a bit like last week when they couldn't agree whether they should attend the Jobs and Skills Summit. A bit like that. So some were in, some were out. But there is a common theme. There is a common theme, which is that for those opposite seek to forget the fact that they've just been in government for almost a decade. They think that 21st of May was ground zero. They think that 21st of May was when the Federation was formed. But in fact, in March, those opposite sat on an increase in wholesale electricity prices. They sat on it, and consistent with their attitude and their approach towards transparency in government, they didn't tell anyone. They didn't tell anyone. Because it's not surprising that they didn't tell anyone, because we know now they didn't have one energy minister, did they? They didn't have one. So perhaps one of the energy ministers knew exactly what was occurring. But nonetheless, the people who didn't know were the Australian people. The people who didn't know were the Australian people. And then they have the hide. Then they have the hide to come in here and ask a sort of incoherent babble of a question,
The Leader of the Opposition on a point of order.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On relevance, the Australian public clearly heard you say and promised to them a $275 decrease in their electricity bills, and you have never mentioned it from that day to this.
The manager... I call the Prime Minister. Order. The Leader of the Opposition has made his point of order, which I heard in silence.
Can I ask you to withdraw that last comment?
The Prime Minister has asked the Leader of the Opposition to withdraw a comment. I didn't hear the comment, but I'll ask him to withdraw.
The comment was he lied to people, and I'm happy to withdraw.
No. Order. The Leader of the House. Order. Members on my left. The Leader of the House.
Mr. Speaker, no one is above the principle, which is all the way through practice, that when you're asked to withdraw, you do so unconditionally. That you just always actually, yeah. Whenever asked to withdraw, but I was asked to withdraw very rarely. He gets asked to withdraw a lot.
Order.
It should be you don't repeat what was said. You simply withdraw. It should be the same rule for everybody. As I know, Mr. Speaker, you've always enforced that sort of behaviour. The House should be better then.
To assist the House, to assist the running of the House, I ask the Leader of the Opposition to withdraw. Thank you. I call the Prime Minister.
Thanks, Mr. Speaker. What we did was December last year put out a coherent policy. A coherent policy after a decade of inaction, after 22 policy announcements, and none of them delivered. But what we know is that there was a 23rd, and the 23rd policy was put up in March of an increase that they are responsible for, which came into effect because it was deliberately delayed by the then government until after the election. We stand by our modelling that we put out. We stand by the fact that renewables are the cheapest form of new energy, and it's not really sort of rocket science. You don't really need an economics degree or a science degree to know that if the market changes from a more expensive level of energy to a cheaper level of energy, you get cheaper energy prices. I know that might be beyond those opposite, but that's exactly what the Australian people know. That's why they got solar panels on their roofs.
Time has expired.